My father looked down at me from the side of the hospital bed, his face cold and unfamiliar. "Don't ever come back," he whispered. "We're done." Behind him, my stepmother, Victoria, adjusted her expensive sunglasses and smiled as if she had finally won. I was 14 years old, and in that moment I had no home. My name is Emily Carter, and today, at 27, I have a life I once believed was impossible. But 13 years earlier, I was a frightened girl whose entire world collapsed inside a sterile hospital room. My mother had died when I was young, leaving only my father and me. For years, we were inseparable. He was the person I trusted most. Then he married Victoria. She always acted sweet whenever my father was watching. The second he left the room, her expression changed. She made it clear that I was an unwanted reminder of his first marriage. For 2 years, she slowly turned him against me. She whispered accusations, created arguments, and convinced him that every problem in their home was somehow my fault. Then came the Tuesday afternoon that destroyed everything. Victoria deliberately took my late mother's diamond necklace and hid it inside my school backpack. When my father came home, she pretended to discover it there. "You stole it!" she screamed. I tried desperately to explain, but my father had already decided I was guilty. The shouting became unbearable. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. Within seconds, I collapsed from a severe panic attack. My father rushed me to the hospital, but there was no love in his eyes when he looked at me. Only anger. After I woke, he stood beside my bed and delivered the words that shattered me. "Don't ever come back." Then he and Victoria walked away. The door closed behind them. I curled into myself, crying silently. I was 14, alone, and legally homeless. A young nurse named Nora entered the room and tried calling every relative she could find. "Aunt! Uncle! Cousin!" Nobody answered. Some numbers were disconnected. My father and Victoria had apparently made sure there was no one left for me to call. Then the door opened again. I expected another nurse. Instead, an elderly man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit stepped inside. Silver hair covered his head, and he carried a polished cane. "I'm sorry," he said warmly. I seemed to have entered the wrong room. He turned to leave. Then he saw my face. He stopped. "Young lady," he said gently, pulling a chair beside my bed. "Would you mind if I sat with you?" For the first time that day, someone looked at me like I mattered, and I finally broke down. I told him everything. I had no idea that this stranger was about to change my entire life. I wiped my tears and told the stranger everything. I told him about my mother, Victoria's constant cruelty, the necklace, and the accusation that had destroyed my relationship with my father. Most of all, I told him about the words my father had whispered before walking away. "Don't ever come back." The elderly man listened without interrupting. His hands rested quietly on his cane, but his expression grew increasingly serious as I spoke. When I finally finished, he reached across the small space between us and gently placed his hand over mine. "Take a breath, child," he said. I looked into his eyes. "You're not alone anymore." Something about those words made my chest loosen for the first time since my father had left. Before I could ask who he was, the hospital door opened. Nora walked in carrying my medical chart. She took 2 steps, then froze. Her eyes moved from me to the elderly man sitting beside my bed. The color drained from her face. The chart slipped from her hands and crashed onto the floor. "You," Her voice trembled. "Mr. Blackwood?" The man slowly looked at her. "Yes, Nurse Nora." She stared at him as though she had seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" he calmly replied, "Making a new acquaintance." Then his expression hardened. "And discovering how vulnerable patients are being treated under my roof." I had no idea what he meant. Then Nora explained. His name was Edmund Blackwood. He wasn't simply a wealthy old man who had wandered into the wrong hospital room. He was a billionaire philanthropist who controlled the medical network, owned major local businesses, and had enormous influence over my father's company. Suddenly, the way Nora was trembling made sense. Edmund stood. "Nora, contact the hospital administrator immediately." She nodded. "Then have your legal department contact Emily's father." Nora hesitated. They blocked our calls. Edmund gave a faint, almost frightening smile. "Use my private line." He paused. "If they still refuse to answer, tell them this. They have 45 minutes to return to this hospital. And if they don't?" His voice became ice cold. "Then their business credit line will be frozen, and Child Protective Services will be waiting at their door." Within minutes, the hospital was in chaos. My father's phone finally rang. He answered expecting another routine call. Instead, he heard Edmund's ultimatum. Victoria tried convincing him it was only a bluff. But my father knew exactly who Edmund Blackwood was. They turned the car around. Less than an hour later, the hospital room door slammed open. My father stormed inside, Victoria following behind him. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded. He looked at me with anger. "We already told the hospital. Emily is no longer our responsibility." Victoria crossed her arms. "She's a liar and a thief." Neither of them noticed the man standing quietly behind them until Edmund stepped into the light. My father looked up. His face instantly went pale. "Mr. Blackwood," my father stood completely still. "Mr. Blackwood." Edmund looked at him without a trace of sympathy. "So," he said quietly, "you do recognize me." My father swallowed. Victoria stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Mr. Blackwood, you don't understand the situation. Emily stole a valuable family heirloom. We had no choice but to protect our household." Edmund's expression didn't change. "I understand more than you think." He reached into his coat and pulled out a tablet. Then he placed it on the bedside table. "While you were driving here, my security team investigated your story." My father stared at the screen. Photographs appeared, security footage, penetration records, a timestamp. Victoria's face suddenly lost its confidence. Edmund pointed toward the screen. "That necklace wasn't stolen by Emily." My father looked at Victoria. "It was sold." Silence filled the room. "3 days ago," Edmund continued, "Victoria sold your late wife's diamond necklace at a downtown jewelry exchange." My father's hands began to shake. The screen showed clear photographs of Victoria entering the store and exchanging the necklace for cash. Victoria immediately began talking. "It isn't what you think." But my father didn't answer. For the first time, he looked at her the way he should have looked at me, with suspicion, with disbelief, with betrayal. I sat quietly on the hospital bed, watching the truth finally come to light. Edmund stepped closer. "You abandoned a 14-year-old child because you believed a lie created by the person standing beside you." My father lowered his eyes. Edmund's voice became colder. "You have 2 choices. He raised one finger. First, I call the police. The evidence supports charges for theft, fraud, and criminal abandonment. Your business relationships will also be reviewed. He raised a second finger. Or you sign these custody documents. A hospital attorney entered the room carrying a folder. Edmund continued. You will permanently surrender custody of Emily to a trusted guardian network funded by my foundation. You will have no further control over her life. My father stared at the paperwork. Then he looked at me. For one brief moment, I wondered whether he would finally apologize. He didn't. He looked at Victoria instead. She was already panicking. Finally, my father picked up the pen. His hand trembled as he signed, page after page. When the final signature was complete, the attorney collected the documents. My father stood. He looked at me one last time. I expected regret. Instead, I saw defeat. Then he and Victoria walked out. The hospital door closed behind them. This time, I didn't cry. The silence felt different. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was freedom. Edmund sat beside me again. His harsh expression disappeared, replaced by the same kindness I'd seen earlier. Emily, he said softly, your life begins today. I didn't know it yet, but he meant every word. Through his foundation, Edmund gave me something I had never expected to receive again. A safe home, an education, a future, and most importantly, someone who believed I deserved one. Edmund kept his promise. After leaving the hospital, I entered a world I had never imagined. His foundation arranged a safe home for me, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about my future. For the first time in years, I could sleep without wondering what accusation would come next. I went to school, worked hard, and slowly rebuilt the confidence my family had taken from me. Edmund never treated me like a charity case. He treated me like someone capable of becoming extraordinary. He became my mentor, teaching me lessons that no classroom could provide. One of the most important was simple. Family isn't always determined by blood, he told me. Sometimes the people who choose to stand beside you become more family than those who share your name. I carried those words with me. 13 years passed. At 27, I graduated at the top of my class. Eventually, Edmund trusted me with a position inside the very foundation that had rescued me. Today, I help young people who have experienced abandonment, betrayal, and difficult family situations. Every time I help someone find safety, I remember the frightened 14-year-old girl lying alone in that hospital bed, the girl who believed her life was over. She was wrong. Her life was only beginning. As for my father and Victoria, their story ended very differently. After my father lost Edmund's financial support, his business collapsed within a year. The company he had spent years building couldn't survive without the backing he had taken for granted. Victoria disappeared soon after the money ran out. My father was eventually left alone, working a modest job and living in a small apartment. I heard about his situation through someone who knew our old family. But I never went looking for him. I didn't need revenge. Life had already taught him the consequences of his choices. For years, I wondered whether I would ever forgive my father. Eventually, I realized forgiveness didn't mean allowing him back into my life. It meant refusing to let his betrayal control my future. That Tuesday afternoon changed everything. I lost a father, but I gained a protector. I lost a home, but I found somewhere I belonged, and I lost the family I thought I needed, only to discover that family could also be built through kindness, loyalty, and choice. Today, I don't define myself by what happened to me. I define myself by what I built afterward. My father once told me never to come back. He probably thought those words would destroy me. Instead, they became the beginning of the life I was meant to live. And sometimes, the person who walks away from you isn't taking your future with them. Sometimes, they're simply making room for something better to enter your life.